Welcome back. Today's story filled with drama and unexpected turns. Hit like, subscribe, and let's jump in.
It's a tragedy that no matter how much our technology develops, mankind stays essentially the same. Avarice, greed, and desire have always been and will be a part of human nature, regardless of how technically accomplished we grow as a race. I considered this as I reflected on the events of the previous 2 weeks, which affected my marriage and my whole life. Just 2 weeks ago, my wife, Lena, and I were aboard the Celestial Voyager, an interstellar passenger liner, when it entered our home system on its way from Terra to Aurora. We'd been together for 8 years, 6 of them as husband and wife, and decided to take a break from Terra, which was still recovering from the great global conflict of 2040, a catastrophic conflict that lasted just 90 minutes but killed over 1 million people. The battle had been finished for 46 years, but the wounds were still visible. Lena and I were part of the effort to stabilize and restore what remained of the information infrastructure, which included what people now refer to as the Internet. We had been there for 4 years and decided it was time to take a break, so we returned home for what I expected to be a long vacation filled with sun, fun, and, of course, lots of wild, uninhibited intimacy with my beautiful wife, something that seemed to have diminished significantly in the last couple of years due to the fact that our work had kept us apart for the majority of our time on Terra. As I glanced out the port in our modest stateroom, Lena said that she was going to the communications section to phone our relatives and inform them that we will be home soon. I shook my head in agreement and continued peering out the little window, hoping to get a sight of our home planet. She returned a half hour later, having made her calls, and walked up behind me, peering over my shoulder into the darkness beyond. "We're still too far away to see home, darling. Maybe in an hour or two, we'll find it. Don't worry, we'll be home soon enough." I turned to face her and threw my arms around her petite waist. "Yes, we will, and I can't wait to get you on the beach at Bright Shore," I informed you. Bright Shore was a region on the western coast of Aurora's lone continent, famed for its picturesque landscape and sandy beaches. Of course, the beaches were entirely clothing optional, with sections designated for outdoor activities. Lena giggled, pushing me away. "Dream on, buddy. Just because we're married doesn't mean I have to mess around with you on the beach," she remarked, smiling. "Maybe in the dance club, but not on the beach. I detest getting sand all over my body, and the last time we did it at the beach, I got burned." "Maybe we need to use a more powerful sunscreen to protect you from sunburn," I remarked. "You're such a naughty boy," Lena remarked. We both turned back and stared out the window, expecting to be the first to see our home Earth. Finally, we saw a small blue dot and realized we were getting near. Aurora was colonized almost 300 years ago, after 76 years of surveys, and was regarded as one of the first successful human settlements beyond the solar system. Aurora, like Terra, faced hazards such as toxic flora, dangerous creatures, and predatory fish. However, the powers that be determined that the hazards were no greater than those mankind had faced on Terra for millennia. In reality, the advantages much surpassed the risks. The ocean, which covered more than 85% of the planet's surface, had about everything a human colony would want in terms of food, and desalination facilities quickly transformed the salty water into something suitable for human use. Better still, the gastronomic pleasures that emerged from the water proved to be very useful to the people that called the Earth home. The same was true for food plants and fruits, which were plentiful. As a consequence, colonists discovered that they lived far longer and healthier lives than they would have on Terra. Researchers hypothesized that a human born on Aurora may live to be 140 years old if they just ate native foods. It also helped that the environment was devoid of the toxic and radioactive waste that had ruined and smothered Terra. Because they were healthier and more energetic, native Solarans were more sexually active than Terrans for a far longer amount of time. While Terran women were going through menopause, native Solaran women were only reaching their sexual prime, and Solaran males were still fathering offspring well into their 60s. The creators also wished to avoid the faults that led to Terra's eventual demise. By the time the colony was formally created, Terra's crime rate had reached an all-time high. Gangs of armed thugs roamed the streets of the world's cities, stealing anything they wanted: food, money, property, women, with little or no consequences. Illicit drugs were sold over the counter to anybody with a few credits to rub together, regardless of age, and the planet's sense of morality was almost non-existent. As a consequence, almost 95% of marriages throughout Terra's supposedly civilized countries ended in divorce, with infidelity accounting for more than 80% of them. So, possibly motivated by a mistaken feeling of righteous outrage, the founders established a harsh system of justice that was fast, ruthless, and, to some, unjust. Adultery, for example, was declared a criminal with severe consequences. Despite its flaws, the system seemed to function, as Aurora had a far lower crime rate than Terra. So, as Terra descended into turmoil, criminality, and perpetual conflict, Aurora thrived. Then came the last major nuclear war, which plunged much of the world into a Stone Age-like state. Almost all of Terra's big cities were utterly wrecked, and the planet's electrical infrastructure were broken, rendering them useless due to EMP. Many of the planet's surviving inhabitants lived in squalor, murdering one another for a gallon of gasoline or a stalk of green celery. It took 30 years for radiation levels to drop low enough for off-world teams to begin rebuilding the planet's infrastructure, and Lena and I have been a part of that work for the last 4 years. It was difficult, to say the least. The hours were long, and the labor was physically demanding. Food and medication had to be imported, and the crews faced rigorous security. Native Terrans had forgotten what it meant to be civilized, and they would practically murder for a single piece of bread or fish. After 4 years, Lena and I decided we needed to return home simply to maintain our sanity and reconnect. Finally, the Celestial Voyager, named after a man who invented an old but still popular science fiction program, arrived at Aurora Station, an orbiting platform that functioned as the planet's port of entry. The intercom sprang to life, announcing our arrival and providing directions for disembarking. "Finally home at last," I remarked, staring at Lena. She seemed to be lost in contemplation and remained silent for a few seconds. "Yeah, finally," she said gently. "Are you all right?" I inquired, apprehensive. She said, "I'm fine," in a neutral tone. I didn't really believe her, however. I would have assumed she would be glad to be home. Something was on her mind, but I couldn't figure it out, and she didn't seem to feel like talking. We exited the spacecraft, gathered our belongings, and proceeded for the shuttle that would transport us to the world below. After passing through customs and an obligatory medical examination, we entered the main terminal and headed for the exit. My wife said nothing to me the whole time and hardly noticed my presence. She abruptly paused and turned to face me. She did not seem happy at all. "I'm sorry, Ryan," she said. "What are you apologizing for, Lena? I don't understand." I saw her gaze shift and felt the presence of 2 other males close to me. I saw they were Solaran security police personnel. "What is this about?" "Ryan Hale," one of them inquired. "Yes," I said. "What can I do for you? You're being arrested, sir," the officer stated. "Please drop your luggage and place your hands behind your back." "What am I being arrested for?" I asked. "I've done nothing wrong." "Adultery," the second officer remarked. "To be precise, multiple counts of first-degree serial adultery." I glanced at my wife, who was witnessing the whole affair. "Lena, what's this?" I asked. "I have never cheated on you. You are aware of this. Why are you doing this to me?" She took a long breath before responding. "Like I said, Ryan, I'm sorry," she said, avoiding to look me in the eye. "Could you please contact my attorney?" I asked. "These claims are untrue." "I have already phoned your father. He's contacted an attorney," she said. "I think it would be best if we said our goodbyes here," she added before turning back and leaving. My thoughts were in turmoil. What the heck was going on? I pondered. I had never even considered cheating on Lena. Even before we were exclusive, I adored her and hoped to spend my whole life with her. The cops read me my rights before escorting me out of the terminal. I felt humiliated since everyone in the airport was staring at me. Someone being carried away in shackles by police was an unusual sight on Aurora. I was put in the back of a police car and driven to prison, where I was processed and placed in a clean but cramped 8x8 square room with a single bar light, a bunk, and an info screen built into the wall. An hour later, I was removed from my cell and led to a reception area where my father awaited me. "What the heck is wrong with you, son?" he asked. "Why would you even consider cheating on Lena, Dad? I promise to you that I've never cheated on her." "I never considered it, and I detest you choosing her side without even speaking to me," I remarked. My father knew I would never lie to him again, not after that one incident when I was a youngster. He could tell when I had messed up simply by glancing at my face. Maybe that is what caused him to back down, or maybe it was my tone of speech. "Okay, I just wanted to see your reaction for myself." "I believe you." I couldn't trust what Lena told me, so I had to approach you directly. "I hope you understand, and I'm sorry. I cannot understand why she would accuse me of this. She never said anything, and she never gave me any sign that anything was wrong. I don't get it either. Something about this does not add up. Anyway, I have hired an attorney. He's the finest, and he should be here anytime. I haven't spoken to your mother yet." "I wanted to get your response first," he said. Thank you, Dad. I appreciate it. Around that time, a tall, well-built guy entered the reception area and approached my father. "I'm Alan Dax. Nice to see you again," he said. "Yes, it's been too long," my father said. "If you don't mind, I'd want to talk to your kid alone first. The prosecutor will also want to question him." "Okay," my father said, shook his hand, and said away. "Don't worry, son," he added before departing. "We'll get to the bottom of this." The lawyer sat across from me and introduced himself as he began his case. "Alan Dax," he replied, extending his hand. I attempted my best to reciprocate the shaking, but it was tough due to the shackles. "Before we begin, Ryan, I'd want to conduct a fast polygraph if you don't mind. This is not admissible in court, but it will help me determine whether you are guilty or innocent. I'm not assuming anything, but I'd need to know whether I'm defending a guilty guy. Please don't take offense, this is only for my own peace of mind," he said, bringing out a little box with cables connected. "No offense, Mr. Dax. What do I need to do?" "Please start by calling me Alan. Let's place these on your fingertips, and then I'll ask you a few questions." After putting the probes on my fingers, he switched on his iPad, connected the box, and powered it on. "Are you ready?" he asked. I nodded to show that I was ready. "Just a few questions to establish a baseline." "Okay," he asked. "Is your name Ryan Hale?" "Yes." "Are you married to Lena Hale?" "Yes." "Have you been on Terra for the last 4 years?" "Yes." "Have you had sexual encounters with anybody else since you became exclusive with Lena?" "No." "This time, I want you to lie so I can compare your reactions." "Okay," he asked. "Okay. Are you a native Terran?" "Yes," I said, lying on purpose. "Okay, that's all I need from this little exam. I feel you may be innocent." "Thank you for being so honest," I answered. "You're welcome." He detached the box and cables and returned them to his bag. He closed his briefcase and glanced at me, rather melancholy. "I don't need to inform you that you are facing severe accusations. I have not yet seen the charge paperwork, but I anticipate them to be available soon. The prosecutor will want to talk with you. Of course, this is critical. Under no circumstances should you talk with him or anybody else without my presence. You are not permitted to address the media at any moment. If someone approaches you, refer them to me. If you have any problems in here, please notify me immediately." "Got it," I said. "Did your wife ever say there was a problem?" he asked. "No, she never has. I'm not sure where this comes from." "I've done nothing wrong," I explained. I felt quite lost. Why did she do this to me? I pondered. "I understand you're worried right now. You're wounded, terrified, and bewildered. You're probably wondering why your wife did this. I understand, but I need you to be strong, okay? We will get through this together. Are you with me?" "Yeah, but it's not easy," I said. He touched my arm. "It will be all right, son. I'll be here with you. Now let's hear what the prosecutor has to say." A few minutes later, 2 guards entered the room and brought us to a smaller questioning room. A guy I assumed was the prosecuting attorney was already there, holding a stack of paperwork. He looked up as we were led in. The guy handcuffed me to a chair and then went, shutting the door. Alan sat next to me. "So, Alan, I see you're defending cheating adulterers now," I said cynically. "My client hasn't been found guilty of anything, Don. He doesn't even have a trial yet. He is assumed innocent unless proved guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, or did you overlook that aspect of our legal system?" "Normally, you'd be correct, but this is a capital adultery case, and the plaintiff has asked that it be expedited," Don says, astonished. "Aren't we a little ahead of ourselves here?" he asked. "There hasn't even been any discovery. My client has the right to see the evidence, and thus far, there has been none. The complainant, Lena Hale, claims your client has had at least 100 sexual encounters with up to 4 women. She further claims that your client spread a dreadful sexually transmitted illness that required considerable medical care, and that her client is the father of at least 1 illegitimate kid. That is a pack of goddamn lies," I said, almost yelling. "She is lying her buttocks off. I have never had sex with anybody other than her since the day we became exclusive." Don placed a folder on the table, which Alan picked up. He opened it and brought out 3 images, which he placed on the table before me. The folder also included a number of additional items that seemed to be affidavits. "These photographs are clearly frauds. Where did you obtain these?" "Your wife gave them to me." She also has footage. Alan put out his hand to prevent me from saying anything further. Don, I'd like to discuss all this with my client for a few minutes before we proceed, if that's okay with you, said the worker. I think that would be very wise given what your client is facing, Don replied, taking out another folder and handed it to Alan. Here is a copy of the charge paperwork, the request for fast track, and the plaintiff's disposal request. I'll take my belongings here and go outside so you may meet with your customer. Please let me know when you're completed. After Don departed, Alan studied all of the paperwork and watched the movie, which was at best terrible and unprofessional. Alan, puzzled. What about the fast track and disposal requests? What's happening? I asked. He raised his hand as he took his communicator out of his jacket. Hold on a second, okay, he inquired, pressing a button on his phone. Hi, Yen. This is Alan. Listen, I need to do an urgent work right now. I need you to call the Terra Rehabilitation Project office and provide me with any documentation, work requests, and dispatch records for Ryan and Lena Hale. I need to know every step they've done with Terra over the previous 4 years. Got it. Good. This is an emergency, therefore I need that information on my desk right now. We will also need the finest audio-visual personnel accessible immediately. Thank you. After closing the communicator, Alan turned to me. This is worse than I expected. You've been charged with many crimes of first-degree serial adultery, which is punishable by death in certain cases. Your wife has asked that it be expedited, which means we have 1 week to establish your innocence without a doubt. Normally, our system states that a person is innocent until proved guilty, but there are situations when the evidence makes the case clear, for example, if someone is caught in the act of murder. In some circumstances, the court has determined that the perpetrator is essentially guilty and, to save time and money, is deemed guilty. The disposal is a favor provided to the victim of the crime. In such circumstances, the victim is given the option of disposing of the guilty individual in a suitable manner. It seems that your wife has a particularly nasty streak, since she demanded that you be killed by muck fish after being publicly castrated. Worse, the prosecutor's office has authorized it. At that point, I felt like my insides were about to be turned inside out, and I battled the urge to pass out. Muck fish were violent monsters similar to piranhas on Terra, but considerably more deadly. They possessed rows of razor-sharp teeth embedded in jaws powerful enough to crush a man's bone. It was said that a school of 10 could eat a robust adult man in minutes. Fortunately, they were uncommon, but if any of them ever entered a body of water, such as a lake, it was only a matter of time until every single living thing in the water was eaten. The creators, who seemed to have a particularly nasty bent, believed that death by muck fish would be the ultimate deterrence to criminal activity. It had been done many times and was seen as exceedingly harsh. In summary, the guilty felon was stripped nude and fastened to a metal pole with a ledge to support his feet. A gag was put in the convict's mouth, and he was gently dropped into a big tank housing the fish. The criminal passed out from shock quickly and eventually died, and the procedure continued until the victim was fully digested. But it wasn't enough for my deceitful wife, who demanded I be publicly castrated for something I never did before being devoured alive. Alan also told me that all of my possessions would be lost and transferred to her as restitution for what I allegedly did to her. I burst into tears, and it took Alan some time to calm me down enough to grasp what he was saying. Ryan, please, let's get to work. I did not claim it would be simple. I need you to look at these images and papers. I gathered my thoughts and examined the photos. There were 3 of them, all of which were clearly fakes. Whoever put these together didn't seem to understand the fundamentals of picture editing. Even an inexperienced first grader could tell they were fabricated. These are obvious fakes done by someone who doesn't even know how to edit a photo, I replied to Alan. He quickly consented. The affidavits were also clearly fakes, produced on what seemed to be outdated Terra devices. I didn't recognize the names on the papers, or even the names of the cities indicated. We also glanced at the video, which resembled one of those blurry animated images prevalent in the 21st century. The quality was, at best, poor. This was clearly faked, Alan said, assuring me that his experts would handle it. Okay, Ryan, we aren't done. I realize this is difficult, but hear me out. There is a method we can establish your innocence beyond a reasonable doubt, but it may be perilous, he warned. I glanced at him. At this point, I reasoned, what could be more perilous than getting devoured by a swarm of hungry fish? What, Alan? Please, I will do anything, I pleaded through sobs. Are you acquainted with anything known as a memory search, he asked. I wasn't and told him so. It's quite new and has just been approved by the courts in the past several years, so I'm not surprised you've not heard of it. It's a strategy for searching and recording your recollections. Because it is her word against yours, and the state is siding with her, this is the only way we can prove your innocence. But there is a caveat, actually, two caveats. First, the surgery may induce brain damage. It's a little danger, but it's still a risk, and around 1% of individuals who had the treatment died as a result of complications. The second disadvantage is that if the search reveals evidence of illegal behavior outside the limits of the first search, the state has the authority to press charges. So, since you became exclusive with Lena, have you participated in any criminal activity? None whatever. My parents taught me to follow the law. Good. Second, have you ever found yourself in compromising circumstances, such as getting intoxicated at a strip club? No, I don't drink, and the only time I go to a club is on a date with my wife. Okay, you'll receive the search request, and Don will have no reason to refuse it. If he does, I will represent him at trial, demanding that all charges be withdrawn. One more thing, and I want you to remember this: there's a provision in the criminal code that has only been used 3 times in the previous 146 years. It was put in place to avoid just this from occurring. It's called the Retribution Act and was enacted 200 years ago. It simply states that if an accused person is proved innocent and punished because of the accuser's malicious activities, the accuser will face the same destiny as the guilty. You mean if I'm proved innocent, Lena will receive the penalty she sought for me? I asked. Yes, that's exactly what I mean, along with any conspirators she may have been working with. I paused for a second. For the last 8 years, I have only loved that lady. I went to Tara because she believed it would be beneficial for us, and I gave her all I could. She now planned to falsely charge me and use the state to murder me in order to get control of my assets. Screw her, I thought. Do it. Burn the witch. You've got it. Just don't tell her, Alan added. I grinned. I finally had control over her, and she had no idea. Alan stood up and allowed Don back into the room. So, have you two chosen what to do? He asked. Yes, we have, Alan said. Good, Don said, smiling. Now, if your client will just sign this affidavit acknowledging his guilt, maybe I can persuade Mrs. Hale to go a bit easy, perhaps changing the disposal to something a bit more humane like molecular deconstruction or incineration. In reality, I want to do a memory search and retrieval technique on my client as soon as possible, preferably today. I know you have the form on your tablet, and you may complete it while we are here. If you ignore my request, prepare to submit a move for urgent dismissal, which I will follow up with a very costly and public lawsuit. Don seemed to calm down after that comment and accede. Very well, Alan. I'll do it right now, and we'll begin your client's memory search immediately. I had hoped your client would see his way to saving the state money and disposing of this swiftly, but it seems that will not be the case. That's too bad. Your client's life is not something to be disposed of like common trash, Alan told me. Of course not, Don said. Do whatever you have to. Your client is supposed to appear at the state hospital in 3 hours for his surgery. I've granted you and his parents permission to remain with him the whole time. I hope that alleviates any concerns you may have about possible prosecutorial misconduct. For the time being, he added, while you're at it, make sure to keep Mrs. Hale away from my client while he is in the hospital. If you would, consider it done, Don said, filling out the restraining order on his tablet. He pressed the submit button before returning his gaze to Alan and me. So, we're still on for 1 week from today. And, Mr. Hale, I genuinely hope you use these final few days to make peace with whichever God you choose to serve. I'm not a vengeful individual, but I have a responsibility to serve the state. I was ready to tell Don that I was more than vengeful and wanted to throw his responsibility up his behind, but Alan gave me a look that screamed hush up, so I didn't say anything. After Don departed, the guard arrived to get us and told me that I had another guest. This is Mrs. Hale. Is this okay? The guard inquired. Only if I can be present during the visitation, Alan told me. Suit yourself, the guard said. We made it back to the visiting room, where Lena was waiting for me. My guard stood back, but he was still able to hear and see the whole encounter. She looked fantastic, as she usually did. I saw she was wearing a knee-length wraparound dress, which is her favorite beach cover-up. I couldn't help but worry who she may be with. Lena, it appears you're on your way to the beach, hoping to have a good time while waiting for my death. She had the good sense to appear ashamed. Yes, I am heading to Bright Shore. I thought I'd take in some sun. Who is he? She inquired, staring at Alan. Oh, him. He's assisting me with some of my last plans. That's probably prudent, she said. What can I do for you? I asked, especially since you're dead intent on having me actually eaten alive over a bunch of fake allegations. You do realize the photographs and video you submitted to the authorities are blatant forgeries? Similarly with the supposed affidavits. I can't believe you'd do that. Please tell me, particularly because I barely have a week to live, who is he? It makes no difference whether they are phony or not. You'll never be able to establish your innocence, but that's all that counts. Just so you know, I've got a fresh new cutter that I want to use on your corpse, and no, I'm not going to use anesthetic when I cut them off, so I hope the agony is enjoyable. You know how much I despise giving you oral pleasure, so chopping off your balls will provide me with some satisfaction. And, by the way, my father says he's bringing in a new batch of eager muck fish specifically for your last public performance. Yes, I understand. Your father is the provincial justice minister, Lena. Does he know what you've been planning? Who do you believe helped put this all up? Who better than the justice minister to lubricate the wheels? She asked. He's also made certain that Samuel and I will have a front row seat for your execution, and we intend to enjoy it well. So, you're doing all this just to screw that sleazeball, Samuel Torres? I asked. You are foolish, do you realize that? She asked. Of course, and whomever else I feel like banging. Who do you suppose kept me warm at night when you were off trying to repair Terrace Information Grid? His isn't as large as yours, but it's extremely massive. And don't worry about me getting sunburned. Samuel intends to take excellent care of me this week, she said, lifting her dress to display her inner thigh. I observed a mark tattooed on her exposed skin. He's even marked me so everyone will know who I belong to, she remarked with a devilish smirk. Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll be extremely properly cared for. I couldn't help smiling. Lena had no clue what she had just done to herself. Samuel and your father, no bad emotions, okay? She asked. You have no clue how I feel right now, Lena. Please enjoy yourself and instruct Samuel to do the same. I'll see you in court. Lena's grin faded. My final sentence had clearly bewildered her, and for a brief instant, I thought I saw shame on her face. That did not last long, however. Goodbye, Ryan. I am sorry about everything. You have no clue, I informed her. Go on, get out of here. After Lena departed, the guards led Alan and me to the hospital, where I was prepared for my memory search. Electrodes were carefully put on my head, and a nurse started in 4 to keep me steady during the long process. I was informed that I would have a strong headache when I woke up, but that turned out to be an understatement. After being linked to what seemed to be many banks of equipment-laden carts, a technician performed what I assumed were tests to ensure that everything was properly set up and operational. He approached me and gave me a last brief. Mr. Hale, he said, all looks to be prepared for the scan. Just so you know, we'll only scan the previous 7 years of memories, which might take some time. You will wake up with a headache, but we will provide you with medication to relieve it. In addition, we'll keep you here for a few days for observation, just to be cautious. I've already advised your lawyer that the scan would be stored, preserved, and secured from unauthorized access. We should get the entire scan findings within 24 hours. Do you have any queries for me at this moment? No, I said. Let's just get this done. A nurse arrived and administered the medication to help me sleep. Within seconds, I was gone. I was informed that the full scan took approximately 8 hours, yet it seemed like nothing happened. One moment I was falling asleep, the next I was waking up with a searing headache. A nurse administered a pain reliever into my 4, and the discomfort started to lessen. Alan and my parents were at my bedside. Great, you're awake. The scan went really well and seemed to be a success. I'm going to oversee and witness the analysis, and I'll contact you. Please get some rest now. I just nodded because my head ached too much to move. Despite the painkiller, my parents' eyes welled up with tears. Son, Alan explained what Lena said today. I cannot believe she did this. I'm very sorry for ever doubting you. Just know that we're 100% behind you on this. She and her father, as well as that Samuel figure, deserve whatever happens to them. Thanks, Dad, I answered. My mother embraced me tightly, and I could feel her tears. Just know that we love you and we believe you, she told us. I nodded in gratitude, it still ached to speak. We'll be just down the hall, okay? Just get some sleep, my father urged. I tried, but my sleep was haunted by dreams, many of which included my wife. They began innocently enough, with pictures of my wife naked, smiling, and giving herself to me, but then she transformed, the mark tattooed on her becoming twisted and nasty before transforming into an image of a fish with rows of razor-sharp teeth poised to devour me whole. I woke up with a shock, my body drenched in perspiration. I attempted to go back asleep after calming down, but the pictures continued pursuing me in my nightmares. Needless to say, I did not get much rest. I asked for help, but none arrived. The whole staff was aware of why I was there, and although they were professional and kind, none of them were nice. When I informed one nurse about my dreams and requested for anything to help me sleep, she kindly declined. Given your situation, I'm not surprised you're experiencing nightmares. Try to recall anything else, maybe a good childhood experience. But you don't understand, I'm innocent, I said. Frankly, what you're going through is normal, she added with a dismissive tone. It's best if you just accept your fate and move on. Damn it. I am not accepting anything. Now, do something or I will have my lawyer take action, I demanded. Mr. Hale, if you don't calm down, he'll have to restrict you more. Please, I don't want to have to put you in stasis for the rest of the week, but I will if you keep having these illusions, she said firmly. I remained silent, accepting that I would not be able to sleep for the duration of my stay here. Finally, Alan returned to the room. My God, you look terrible. Have you had any sleep at all? Not much, I said. I informed him of my reoccurring nightmares and the staff's unwillingness to do action. He touched my arm. Do not worry. I'll talk with them and resolve this. I simply wanted to let you know that the analysis of your scan is complete. It's been confirmed, certified, and submitted to the court. As I expected, there is no recall of any criminal action, and definitely no infidelity on your side in the previous 8 years. The court has no option but to find you innocent of all accusations. So, that's all, right? I asked. Not quite, he said. I have a small army working on your case right now, and they have been working around the clock. There are plenty of unsolved questions. We obtained dispatch logs from the rehab project, and from what we can discern, you were nowhere near the location stated in the affidavits that were submitted. Tell me, did you and your wife do much work together while on Terra? No, she was confined in the Neo-Osaka region working on the local medical facilities while I was transferred all over the globe inspecting installations. Do you know whether your wife worked with Samuel when you were in Terra? He asked. I know they spent much of their time in the same place. I didn't see her very often, maybe once or twice a month, perhaps longer, because I was generally traveling. I saw him even less. I'm not sure how close together they worked, and we never addressed it, I added. Interesting. Samuel was really working in the archives. Were you aware of this? Again, I had to answer no. We didn't discuss our work much. Why? I asked. Well, we attempted to identify the persons identified in the affidavits your wife submitted to corroborate their allegations, but we were unable to do so. Then we searched for the thumbprints used on the affidavits themselves. Guess what? In all cases, the fingerprint belonged to a deceased person, one was over 446 years, and guess who worked on the burial registration project? Are you Samuel? I asked. Yes, he said, and guess who was directly responsible for bringing those affidavits to the prosecuting attorney's office? Your wife's father is the provincial justice minister. Trust me, that never occurs. Do you believe Lena's father is involved in this conspiracy? I asked. Absolutely. Given what your wife stated yesterday, everything makes sense today. Let me go speak to the medical professionals while you attempt to relax. A few minutes later, the nurse entered the room with a guy who I assumed was her boss. Mister, he continued, Hale, I do want to apologize for the treatment you've suffered. We're here to relieve pain and suffering, not to prolong it, and I guarantee that you'll receive the help you need. Again, I apologize. He glanced at the nurse, who was ashamed. She approached my side and pushed something to my forehead. Mr. Hale, I'm putting you up with a brain-wave generator to help you sleep and stop the nightmares, and I really apologize for my previous attitude. She said, please forgive me. I accepted her apologies as she clicked the wave generator button on my forehead. Within minutes, I became weary and eventually fell asleep. I awakened after 8 hours of the finest sleep I'd had in quite some time. The guards came in and informed me that I was being sent back to the detention facility. Fortunately, they let me retain the brain-wave generator, and a nurse demonstrated how to operate it correctly. The following 3 days passed quickly for me. My parents visited me on a regular basis to lift my spirits, and Alan came by every day to update me on the case and prepare me for my court appearance. My wife had clearly been arranging this for quite some time with her father and boyfriend. I was well prepared for my court appearance. On the day of my court appearance, the guards fed me a substantial breakfast, let me take a lengthy shower, and even gave me additional time to dress in the well-tailored suit my parents had packed for me. They believed that this might be my final day alive, so they gave me some liberty. Alan and my dad traveled with me to the Justice Building. We were led inside the courtroom and instructed to our seats. The prosecutor was already at his table, and my wife, Samuel, and her father sat in the first row behind him. They each smirked at me, knowing that it would be my final day. The media was also there, considering that my wife's father, our province's top justice official, was in the audience. No doubt they were all hoping for a violent conclusion to the day's events. The judge entered the courtroom, and the bailiff directed everyone to stand. We took our seats. After the judge sat down, both sides prepared to submit their evidence in the case of the state versus Ryan Hale. The court inquired whether the state was ready. The prosecutor said. "The defense is ready," Alan said. "Very good. How does the defense plead?" The judge inquired. Alan stood up. "The defendant maintains his complete innocence, Your Honor," he said. "Understood. The state may present its case," the court said. Don stepped up to face the judge. "Your Honor, the state has presented proof that the defendant, Ryan Hale, has committed several charges of serial adultery against his wife over the previous 4 years, infecting his poor, suffering wife with a sexually transmitted illness. In addition, he impregnated another lady during the procedure, and we suspect he intends to continue his clandestine and criminal activities upon his return to Terra. The evidence has been presented to the court, and it is the defendant's responsibility to establish his innocence beyond a reasonable doubt. Given the gravity of the allegation, Mrs. Hale, the aggrieved person, demands a quick decision and that disposal be carried out right now," Don remarked before sitting down. The judge reviewed the documentation before saying anything more. "Given that the injured party seeks Mr. Hale's execution by muck fish, I'd like to hear what he has to say before we execute him, if that's all right by you." "As you wish, Your Honor, but the state requests the order be issued expeditiously," Don responds. "Kindly keep your bloodlust in check," the judge said. Don nodded and sat down. The judge stared at Alan. "What evidence does the defense plan to present?" the judge inquired. Alan stood up. "Your Honor, the defense has incontrovertible evidence that not only shows the defendant's innocence of all charges but also shows that the defendant is the target of a heinous plot to use the judicial system to kill him and legally steal all of his assets in order to continue Mrs. Torres' illicit and highly illegal affairs," Alan told the jury. Alan's statements caused the judge's eyes to widen, and an audible gasp echoed throughout the courtroom. Lena glanced uneasily at Samuel and her father. "Present your evidence, please," the judge said. "The defense would like to call expert witnesses to explain the alleged evidence presented by the state," Alan informed me. "Please," the judge said. "The defense calls Lars Larson to the stand, please," Alan requested. A tall guy in his early 30s entered the witness stand. Before taking the stand, the bailiff had him make an oath to speak the truth or face perjury. Alan approached him. "Mr. Larson, you are one of the state's leading experts in audio and video evidence, are you not?" he asked. "Yes, sir, I am," Lars said. Alan gave him copies of the images used by the prosecution. "Have you had an opportunity to properly study the images given by the state, together with the underlying source files?" "Yes, sir, I have," Lars said. "What is your conclusion after reviewing the so-called evidence?" "These files are obviously frauds. Worse, they seem to have been clumsily edited to give the impression that the defendant is participating in sexual conduct," Lars said. "What brought you to that conclusion?" Alan questioned. "The initial image files were prepared using an encoding system that has not been utilized in well over 3 centuries. After a thorough search of Terra's old internet archives, we discovered the precise photographs utilized to generate these forgeries." "Were you also able to uncover who may have accessed these files?" Alan questioned. "The system log indicated they were accessed by an individual with a restoration team," Lars told me. "And were you able to determine who that person could have been?" "We were," Lars said. "Could you kindly name that person?" "The credentials used belong to Samuel Torres," Lars said. As Samuel glanced around anxiously, gasps echoed around the courtroom. "Thank you," Alan said. "Did you get the chance to review the video given by the state as well?" Alan questioned. "We did," Lars said. "What is your conclusion?" "The video file was not forged, but we were able to locate it in the same internet archive," Lars said. "So the original video is also from Terra's old internet archives?" Alan questioned. "Yes, the video could not have been taken any time in the last 4 years," Lars informed me. "Did you identify the user who downloaded it?" Alan questioned. Yes, it was downloaded by Samuel Torres about the same time as the photos were accessed. Finally, did you have the chance to review the purported affidavit submitted by the state? Yes, we did. What conclusion did you reach after reviewing those documents? Allen questioned. The papers were generated using century-old Terra technology. We were unable to trace the persons listed on the papers, but we uncovered an error in the identifying thumbprints. Please explain, Allen asked. In each instance, the fingerprint belonged to someone who had died many years before. One document, for example, contains the print of a person who died in Cascadia in 2018, Lars said. So you're saying these affidavits couldn't have been signed by somebody alive inside the previous 4 years, correct? That's right. Thank you. Allen said. Don, that's all your witness. No questions at this time, Don said. Your Honor, I'd like to call Abel Kane to the stand, please, Allen told you. The judge agreed, and a second guy took the witness stand. He sat down after pledging that he would speak the truth. Mr. Kane, could you kindly inform the court about your present position? Allen questioned. Yes, sir. I am currently the senior system administrator in charge of the server farm that handles memory searches, he said. Allen gave him a piece of paper with rows and columns of data. Mr. OK, could you kindly identify the document I just given you? Allen questioned. Yes, sir. It's part of the main server access log file, Abel said. Please focus your attention on the rows highlighted in yellow. Could you kindly explain to the court what those rows indicate? They tell me someone tried to access and delete a memory search file, Abel said. What memory search file was that? Allen questioned. The file corresponds to a search conducted on the defendant Ryan Hale. Was the file deleted successfully? Allen questioned. No, sir, it was not, Abel said. Could you explain why it was unsuccessful? Allen questioned. Yes, our system is built to allow just 2 users to delete files. I am one of just 2 people who have that right. However, I should point out that even if the file was properly deleted from the server, it would not have been removed from the system owing to several redundant servers and continual backups, he said. I see. Can you identify the person who tried to delete the file? Yes, I can. And who might that person be? Allen questioned. Justice Minister Victor Daniels, Abel said. The courtroom erupted in gasps, leading the judge to pound his gavel. The minister's face became white as his name was mentioned. Can you provide any explanation for why the provincial justice minister would seek to destroy that file? Allen questioned. Don immediately stood to protest. Objection, Your Honor. That invites speculation, he stated. Sustained, the judge said. That's all the questions I have for this witness, Allen told me. Your witness, he said. Don. No questions at this time, Don said. The defense calls Justice Minister Victor Daniels, Allen informed me. Daniels hesitated at first, but took the stand when the judge encouraged him to do so. He pledged to speak the truth before taking his seat. Minister Daniels, you are Mrs. Hale's father, right? Allen questioned. I am, Daniels said. Did you or did not try to delete the memory search file corresponding to the defendant? He asked. I don't recall, Daniels said. Minister, may I please remind you that you are under oath and perjury is a serious matter, Allen informed you. Daniels felt outraged. Of course, I understand that perjury is a severe problem. I do a lot of dull chores at work, and I don't remember reading that file. That's it, okay, Minister, let's try something a little simpler. Did you or did not support your daughter's efforts to bring these charges forward? I may have made a call or 2, Daniels said. Did you order fresh muck fish for the defendant's scheduled execution? Allen questioned. I signed so many documents, I can't recall anything. It is possible. Let me show you some footage, Minister. Maybe this will jog your memory, Allen said. He signaled to the court's audio-video technician, who showed footage of Lena's detention facility visit Southwest that the whole court could hear and watch her testimony. Well, Minister, Allen inquired. Okay, so maybe I did help fast-track Lena's plan a bit, Daniels said. Of course, I realize she is your daughter, and you just want the best for her, correct? Yes, Daniels said. Minister, how would you define your relationship with your daughter? Allen questioned. Objection, Don yelled. Immaterial. Allen turned to face the judge. Your Honor, if you will bear with me, please, this is extremely important to our case. Make your point, the judge instructed. Allen indicated to the audio-video technician, who began another video. The courtroom exploded again. Order in court, the judge spoke loudly. Allen gestured to pause the video. Minister, please identify the three people in this freeze frame. He asked. Yes, Daniels said. And who are they? Alan questioned. Myself, my daughter Lena, and Samuel Torres, Daniels said. Please tell the court when and where this was taken, Alan said. Keep in mind that it's time-stamped. This week at Bright Shore Beach, Daniels said. Specifically, in an area authorized for outdoor sexual activity, correct? Alan questioned. Yes, he said. Alan sent another signal to the audio-video technician, and playing resumed. Lena was seen in the video hugging Daniels and Samuel before taking off her clothing. Daniel and Samuel also stripped nude. Lena then pursued sexual behavior with both of them. The court audience saw a passionate sexual session between the three that lasted barely a few minutes. I felt like throwing up as I saw my wife debase herself like a common prostitute in front of Samuel and her father. What they stated after was far worse. Just think, Lena, she added in the video, in less than a week we'll be able to do this every day, all day long, and we won't even have to sneak around anymore. Everyone chuckled. Don't worry, darling daughter. Your uptight snob of a spouse will soon become muck food. I'll personally see to it, even if it means pushing the scum sucker into the tank myself. I heard he did a memory search. Is there any way we can get rid of or deal with that? I am the Justice Minister. I will go in and erase it. Do not worry. Alan gave the command to halt the video. You might have heard a pin drop in the courtroom. Lena and Samuel kept their heads down and covered their eyes, as if this would prevent the media from seeing them. Would you want to alter your statement, Minister, or do you want to be prosecuted with perjury, incest, and the other counts you'll face today? Alan questioned. No comment at this time as I refuse to give an answer that might incriminate myself, Daniels told the reporter. Alan shook his head in amazement. Justice Minister, he cynically replied. I'm done with this witness, Alan remarked. I have no questions at this time, Don added. Alan took out another tablet and gave it to the bailiff, who sent it to the judge. Finally, Your Honor, this is the result of an intense memory search of the defendant spanning the last 7 years, the entire duration of his exclusive relationship with Mrs. Hale. As shown by the summary on page 1, which was signed and validated by the Justice Ministry, Mr. Hale has participated in no activity that the state considers unlawful, such as adultery. Because the defendant committed no adultery, he cannot have pregnant another woman in the previous 4 years, nor could he have transferred a sexually transmitted illness to his wife. In light of this evidence, Your Honor, I move that my client be immediately declared innocent and all charges dismissed, Alan said as the court reviewed the report. I've had to agree, Counselor. Will the defendant Ryan Hale please rise? I stepped up next to my lawyer. The judge gave me a long, hard stare. Mr. Hale, it is the decision of this court that you have been declared innocent of all allegations brought against you. Alan said, please accept the court's apologies. Your Honor, my client hereby invokes his rights under the Retribution Act, he informed me. Objection, Don yelled. This is quite irregular. Your Honor, the Retribution Act has not been used in years. The judge gave the prosecutor a stern look. You're aware that the Retribution Act was enacted to prevent precisely this kind of prosecutorial misconduct, counsel. The things I've seen and heard today make me sick to my stomach. You should count yourself fortunate that I am not going to throw you into a muck tank with the 3 people behind you. I will, however, ensure that the Judicial Review Board investigates your complete ineptitude in this situation. As for the co-conspirators in this attempted murder via the court, you are therefore condemned to death using the same manner you selected for Mr. Hale. My wife, Samuel, and Daniels looked like they were about to become ill. Their cheeks became pale, and their eyes were the size of saucers. However, I am afraid that this plot may include more than just the 3 of you. As a result, I'm ordering you to be removed from this court for an urgent memory scan. Once I've studied the scan data, I'll make my final decision on your disposal. Guards, take them away, the judge said as the 4 guards approached my wife and her co-conspirators. Daniels and Samuel exchanged glances, nodded, and then lunged forward, attempting to seize one guard's sidearm. The other 3 guards responded swiftly, drawing their sidearms and firing numerous times, the plasma missiles passing straight through both men and throwing them to the ground in bleeding heaps. Please do not shoot me, Lena screamed, raising her hands in surrender. The guards promptly seized her and held her hands behind her back. She gazed at me as she was brought outside. Please, Ryan. I do not want to die. Have compassion on me, she pleaded through tears. Are you going to have mercy on me? I asked. Not hardly. The judge slammed his gavel and said, order in the court. He stared at me before speaking again. Mr. Hale, I highly recommend that you get therapy to help you cope with the events of the previous week. I apologize once more, he said. I will, Your Honor. Thank you, I said. Mr. Dax, the judge began, please join me in my chambers after you finish with your client. Yes, Your Honor, he replied. Alan grasped my hand in congratulations, but he seemed unhappy. I'm delighted we won, of course, Ryan, but I really apologize for what it cost you. I'll phone the medical institution to let them know you'll be there when you check out of custody. Maybe your parents can take you over there. Thanks, Alan. Come by and check in on you. I couldn't have made it through this without you, I said. He was correct, I had won the lawsuit and proven my innocence, but at what cost? My marriage had been entirely wrecked, and my faith in fundamental humanity had all but vanished. I would exact my retribution, but I questioned if I would be able to live with myself in the long term. I had a lot to think about before I could go on with my life. The guards walked my parents and me out of the courthouse and into the parking lot via a passage inaccessible to the media, which was lucky. The last thing any of us wanted was to deal with a nasty group of reporters. We first traveled to the detention facility, where I was checked out and had my stuff returned to me. The security at the center was kind, having seen the whole incident occur on their data displays in real time. We then headed to the medical institution, where I was checked in and assigned to a well-appointed private room. I sank in a reclining chair, psychologically tired after what had happened. My parents came over after speaking with what I assumed to be my counselor. Get some rest, son. You've gone through a lot, and I want you to know that I'm pleased of how you handled yourself. I'm proud of you too, Ryan, my mother added, giving me one of her legendary embraces. I suddenly burst into tears. My mother held me even more tightly. It's okay, Ryan. It's over now. You're safe, no one will harm you. I soon calmed myself and observed a gorgeous lady of Lena's age standing over us. When I glanced up, she remarked, Your mother is correct, Ryan. You are safe, and I am here to help you get over it. I see you've made a positive first step. It's critical that you handle your sadness as quickly as possible. The counselor, Clara, chatted briefly with my parents before returning to me and saying, Your parents are going home for the time being, but they will return shortly. You're very fortunate to have such loving parents, you know. She knelt down in front of me and grasped my hand. I quickly felt better. Now tell me about your life with Lena, she said. I told her about how we met in school, the years we spent dating, and what I felt was a successful marriage. We accepted the 6-year assignment to Tara so that we could return and start our family. We reasoned that with our combined incomes, we could purchase a home overlooking Bright Shore Beach and raise our children. I suppose that won't happen now. I don't see how she could have done this. What did I do wrong? What made her despise me so much that she would do this to me? I do not know, Ryan. Maybe something occurred while you two were on Tara. You said that you spent more time apart than together. Perhaps she misplaced it throughout the separations. It has happened before, you know. But she knew we'd be separated for the majority of the tour. That is why we took this vacation to reconnect with one another. She is now going through a memory search. Maybe then you'll get your questions addressed. Yeah, maybe, I said. You had a difficult day. Why don't you get some sleep and we can chat more later, okay, I said. Clara excused herself and exited the room. I undressed and crawled beneath the covers, falling asleep quickly. Several hours later, I awoke to the sound of my door alarm. I put on my robe and looked to see who was at the door. It was Alan. I opened the door to allow him in, and Clara followed straight after him. Well, I see you're being well cared for, Alan replied, smiling. I have some news for you. What? I asked. The memory search for Lena is complete. Unfortunately, she did not fare well in the process. It seems she suffered a major brain aneurysm, which they were unable to control in time. Ryan responded, She's dead. I was not particularly saddened to learn that she had died, but I was pleased that I would not have to watch her execution. I nodded, indicating my comprehension. So, what did you find out? I asked. Her skin immediately brought up a host of red lights. Ryan, it turns out that your wife had multiple indiscretions while you were on Tara, and her connection with her father began when she was a teenager. There's a lot more, but I didn't have time to look through it all. Furthermore, her death effectively closes the case for the state. All that remains is the disposal of assets, which my team is currently working on. With the combined assets of your wife, her father, and Samuel, it seems that you will be financially secure for the rest of your life. Anyway, for the time being, you'll be in the very competent hands of my daughter, Clara, who, by the way, is not only available but also actively seeking for someone," he said, smiling. Clara smacked Alan's arm and laughed. "So you'd better be on your best behavior, young man," he said with a smile. "It wouldn't do to get the next justice minister upset with you." "Are you going to accept Daniel's job?" I asked. "Yes, that is what the court requested to see me about following your trial. It turns out he serves on the Justice Ministry's advisory board, and he gave me the post on an interim basis until the next election. The board must approve it, but that is a mere formality," he added. "Congratulations," I said. "Thank you, but I'm not done with your case yet, so we'll be in contact. And don't worry about the price, since the state failed to prosecute, it must pay all court expenses and attorney fees," he said. "So, get some rest, take care of yourself, and we'll be in contact, okay?" he asked. I thanked him for all he had done for me and shook his hand before leaving. Over the following 3 days, Clara filled me in on the depth of Lena's adultery. The memory scan revealed that Lena had gotten a dangerous and life-threatening STD on Terra. To be more specific, it was a mutant flesh-eating strain of gonorrhea that could kill in a matter of days. Clearly, she had not received it from me. It found out that she had had many sex fests with various guys while I was working on the planet's information infrastructure. Fortunately, she had it treated before we got back together, so I never caught anything from her. She had also had numerous sexual experiences with Samuel, but it turned out that he was nothing more than her father's sidekick, and the sex was just a bonus for taking part in my scheme. It found out that her father, who regarded me as a barrier to the connection he desired with his own daughter, had organized the whole affair. Clara spent many days with me, only discussing the trust difficulties I was now experiencing and working with me to overcome my hesitation to ever consider a relationship with another woman after what Lena had done. I just couldn't put myself in a scenario where I'd be harmed like that again. A week after my trial, Clara sat me down and we had a lengthy conversation. "Ryan, the fact is that humans today are the same as they were in the Stone Age. We all have wants, and they have not altered just because we are technologically evolved. Most of us really want to be nice, respectable individuals who do the right thing. However, other people, such as your ex-wife and her father, are unconcerned about such matters and would harm anybody to get their way. Ryan, I've had the opportunity to spend the past week with you exclusively, and I know you're a nice and respectable guy who wants to do the right thing and perhaps one day have a wife and children. I understand how difficult this has been for you, but we are not all like Lena. The fact is," she added, "I've come to know you very well over the past few days, and I'd love nothing more than to show you what it's like to have the exclusive affection of a decent woman. Would you allow me to do that for you?" Wow, I thought, this was a counseling approach I'd never heard of before, but I was eager to investigate the idea. I stared at Clara and attempted to compare her to my fondest memories of Lena. That's when it struck me for some reason, I had no nice memories of my ex-wife. Sure, we'd had a lot of closeness, but everything I remembered about her was tainted by what she'd done and what I'd discovered from her own recollections. I also recognized that Lena was the only woman I ever fell in love with and the only one with whom I had ever had an intimate relationship. No wonder I was so messed up. I hoped Clara wasn't just giving me pity and closeness to help me cope with Lena. "You know, Clara, I've never been one for casual flings," I said. "I know, neither am I." Clara's proposition piqued my interest. I threw my arms around her, kissing her on the lips. She replied, and we played tongue tag for a few minutes. We quickly undressed one another and were nude on my bed. We quickly fell madly in love with each other. For the time being, my world comprised solely of Clara and myself. I really wanted to make love to this lady till the end of time. She threw her arms around me and rested her cheek on my shoulder. We gradually returned to reality and kissed like two long-lost lovers. "So, what's the prognosis, doctor?" I asked. Clara grinned. "I think you need a lifetime of one-on-one counseling, and I believe I have just what you need," she told me. I like the sound of that. We kissed again and spent the rest of the day making love to one another until falling asleep in each other's arms. Clara, of course, was correct. She had precisely what I needed, and it turns out that I had what she needed, too. It so happened that she had been the victim of an overbearing lover who mistreated her, nearly to the point of physical violence. This is where my narrative started, although it was far from ended. A few months later, we were married. Alan was correct when he claimed I'd be set for life. After obtaining the assets from the 3 co-conspirators who attempted to have me assassinated, the rehab project purchased the remaining 3 years of my contract and paid me what was supposed to be delivered to Lena. Clara continued to work at the medical center until she became pregnant with our first child, Alan Core, who we called after our dad. She then chose to devote herself entirely to becoming a wife and mother. I continued to work as a part-time design consultant on the rehab project, doing the most of my work from our custom-built house overlooking Bright Shore Beach. The majority of my time was spent raising our kid and having regular one-on-one therapy sessions with my gorgeous wife, sometimes on the beach below our house. Alan was elected as the provincial justice minister, promising to change the death sentence at the top of his agenda. His first item of business was to halt the centuries-old tradition of feeding convicts to muck fish. There were other adjustments inside the ministry, including a thorough assessment of all cases handled by some of the prosecutors. A number of the lawyers, including Don, began searching for jobs outside of the government sector. My thoughts would sometimes return to my past with Lena. Clara, being the empathic, loving beauty she is, saw it in my face and used her finest counseling techniques until all I could think about was her warm body wrapped around mine. After our third child, I realized there was never enough time to reflect on the past, but there was plenty of time for me to consider my future with Clara, our 3 children, and the grandchildren they would bring into the world. There was clearly a bright future. Dear listeners, please leave your opinions in the comments box below, and remember to like, share, and subscribe.